So the first part, I'm gonna walk through kind of range of different type of social learning programs in real world, in animal kingdoms, including humans, and showing some taxonomy of social learning programs from very basic, simpler kinds of tasks to more cognitively challenging or complex social learning tasks. And then I'd like to show some like basics of those programs, which are I'm gonna introduce the so-called multi-armed bandit task, which could be kind of related to many diverse different types of social learning programs. And so I think one of the multi-armed bandit task is kind of one of the basic tasks from which you can build your own further questions. So that I'd like to invite all of you to the demo game, multiplayer online game, fun part, and then afterwards I'd like to have some discussion with you guys about how this very abstract, simpler multi-armed bandit task could be related to more real-world, more complex tasks you might be interested in. All right, so social learning, social decision making is everywhere, right? From those tiny insects, the honeybees and ants, to those bird flocks and fish schools, the primates, also like pack of those ducks. All those although they are very different species and they are doing very different tasks, different things, but they are all using somehow social info. Social learning is key to understand their dynamics and patterns at the collective population level. And of course, we humans are also using social learning massively in daily life, right? Yesterday, you just follow others to guide you to the poster session area, right? So this is social learning. So although, as you say, these are totally diverse, different range of tasks. But I'd say we could still kind of abstract these tasks through kind of simpler modeling. And one of that is, so we can say many of those decision-making tasks could be seen as a choice task, a choice between multiple discrete behavior options. So for example, this is an example from ants. So these are Temnothrax family ants. So they are we're known for house hunting. So when their nest is broken, they have to move out and search for next nest, right? And so this is experimental work done by Takao Sasaki and colleagues. So they made this arena where alternative nest site is the good feed, good nest or poor nest, and then these ants could repeatedly search for the environment, and then eventually they could accurately move to the better nest site. So even though each tiny individual ant can only access to the very limited information in the environment, but still as a group as a whole, they can make a accurate decision. So as you can see, this is although this is experimental work, but this is obviously choice between two discrete options. And also second example is these bars, gratids. So they can be trained to open up these tiny food box by two different ways. One is open up for the red colored door, and then other ways they can also open up this door by using blue colored side. So these are also two discrete choice behavior options, and so they can get some rewards from choosing either of the option. And then these birds can also learn this type of behavior through social learning, observation. So in this case, these birds are observing each other's behavior, And so interestingly, so in this type of situation, we also need to consider some like social kind of game theoretic dynamics as well. So in this case, it is called scrounging behavior, or maybe it's a free riding type of behavior. So I'll come back to this point later in this tutorial. So these birds, foraging behavior, and ants are doing nest hunt. So they are different tasks, but still, it's very similar. And we could see these tasks as a multi-unbounded framework. So these could be like understood through this basic, very abstract gambling setup. So let's say you are facing these two options, and they are slot machines, and you want to get as much money as possible through that repeated choice. And then these slot machine would give you some money, and money would be dropped from this unknown distribution, but you don't know which one is good and which one has what kind of distribution. But you have to learn this type of payoff nature through your own experience. So this is a kind of core mechanism or core assumption under this multi-unbounded task. And although this is, again, this is very abstract, and this is like just gambling behavior in casino, but still this is a really good mathematically or computationally tractable framework to understand many different type of learning decision-making program in the real world. So that's why we'd like to focus on this task during this series of tutorial sessions later. But before that, let me briefly walk through what kind of different topics or different tasks exist in the real world, and how these more complex tasks could be related to this very basic MAB task. So for example, first example, so decisions could also unfold with this spatial structure. So in our left-hand side, the decision-making could be also informed by a spatial structure. So for example, these are also kind of a multi-unbounded task, but let's say, in some in nature, we can see some options are more similar to each other than others, and we can see this kind of spatial correlation or conceptual similarity to guide your exploration behavior, right? So this type of spatial structure would be also next level, next step for this multi-unbounded task. And also, Vivek will be talking about tomorrow, which is also like a decision-making process itself could be also like considered as a more geometrically nature. So these are, so the spatial structure would be one additional aspect of this decision making. And further, we can also think about a further higher dimensional case. So spatial structure are only like 2D or 3D space, but we can, of course, think about more multi-dimensional decision making. Let's say, like if you want to make a very nice arrowhead, you can change the kind of stone materials, and you can also tune the shape and height and width. So there are many dimensions you can tune. So these are kind of multi-dimensional decision making. And although this multi-dimensional decision making seems to be similar to 2D or 3D spatial search, but there are also very interesting similarities exist as well. And these differences could be understood and captured through computational modeling work. So we're gonna also cover a bit in a tutorial. Yeah, and then yet another spatial aspect. So far, spatial correlated bounded or multi-dimensional decision makings are you have to those spatial structure can guide your next decision making. But in the real world, the spatial structure is also important because you have to also you have to decide which angle to move, and how long you move in the next time step, right? So this type of online decision making, to guide your body along this spatial structure is very key in the real world decision making, especially like those migration behavior, and also maybe humans also working in the pedestrian behavior is also important aspect of human life. So those spatial navigation is another key aspect. Right. So so far I've been working through more something like decision-making task, which could theoretically be solved by individuals without any social learning, right? Multi-bounded or spatially correlated bounded or those navigation, they are tasks that can be solved by individual. But here, also there's something unique about social learning. So this is, so for example, this is a social foraging, which has been extensively studied in evolutionary biology. So in social learning situations, because copying others is usually cheaper than searching for the environment yourself, so copying could be seen as a free rider, as I said. So, and then if this is a free riding, why, and if this is cheaper than individual learning, why would you willing to explore environment yourself, right? So that's a kind of public good dilemma type of game. So this is a classic work suggesting that just copying others isn't always promote population level fitness, right? So because of this public goods nature. So this is called Rogers paradox, which we also will talk about later. So this game theory aspect is important. And also in social foraging, we also maybe need to think about resources limited. So because in the social foraging, let's think about what happens if loads of individuals converge on one single feeder site, and then food is limited. So amount of food is going to be really decreasing over time, right? So we have to think about this resource density dynamics as well with social interaction. Yeah, and also in social learning, yeah, this is the recent work done by Alex here. So we usually we could assume that social learning is beneficial because we doing the similar task, right? So observing others would be informative, but it's not necessarily the case always, right? Because we might be having different tastes, or I like sushi, but some of you don't really like sushi. So in that case, my behavior wouldn't be informative for you. So the matter of taste, and also we might have some different physiological demands and needs. Also because we could be in totally different environments. So in that case, observing others isn't necessarily totally informative. So then the question is, how can we use social info? And then in this work suggests that social learning could be beneficial, but when we use social learning strategically, right? So we have to do this in a smarter way. And so yeah, so that's then gradually. So we have to think about strategic type of social learning. So we have to be very strategic or selective in timings and way to use social info, because otherwise Rogers paradox suggests, just blindly copying or randomly copying others isn't really adaptive or beneficial. So we have to be selective and strategic in the use of social learning. And then humans, especially very well-known species, to use social learning in very strategic way, because thanks to this metacognitive or theory of mind type of abilities. For example, these are the very well-known classic work. Hide and smell is supposed to be. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, it comes. Yeah. So although, as you see, these are just abstract, shape just moving around. Yeah. But you can see some drama here happening, right? Although it doesn't make any sense, right? These are just triangles and circles, but we can see, humans like inclined to interpret, or like kind of project some like social context and agency to this type of, even though these are just the abstract shape. But so this suggests that we have some skills or kind of ability or tendency to like infer some other agents' goals and intentions. So these are kind of important skill, crucial skill to use wisely use social learning. Also, the center figure is also showing this classic work by Baron Cohen. So this is actually his PhD thesis. So this is called Sally and Ann task to test theory of mind, kind of false belief type of theory of mind. Yeah, for example, this is like, so this is Sally and this is Ann, and yeah, then Sally's put her like marble or some doll, a marble to this basket, and Ann observes it, right? And then Sally goes out from the room, maybe go to the toilet, and then Ann is just happy with it. And then, so this is Ann. So Ann, for some reason, she moved this marble to this box, right? But of course, the Sally doesn't know it. And then Sally comes back. The question is, where is Sally look for her marble? This basket or this box? And then to answer this question correctly, you have to have some like type of theory of mind, kind of perspective taking of Sally's view. So this kind of test suggests that humans are kind of could develop this type of theory of mind, and this type of skills could be beneficial for social learning. I'll explain it later. But actually, well, it's quite rare though. But non-human primates also, some evidence suggests that non-human primate might be also able to some kind of social cognition, social like money. So this case, this is a manipulation. So this mother chimpanzee, I guess, this mother is grooming her son, and then because and then this son will return this grooming back to his mother, right? And then this mother take these stones from son. So well, this could be interpreted as like so it's a kind of manipulation behavior. And so although more research will be needed to kind of establish whether this is actually manipulation or not, but so it's a kind of possibility that non-human primate great apes might be able to do this social inference as well. But still, like these must be commonly used in humans. So these examples showing how this TOM theory of mind social inference could be used in social learning. right? So this example shows this. Yeah, so for example, you can infer how trustable, how skillful, knowledgeable this advisor is. And then, so you can tune your use of social learning by depending on how you believe this advisor is knowledgeable on this task. So you can use this social inference to guide your social learning. And also, yeah, this study shows this. You can also guess the other people's intentions and whether this guy's intended to help me or not, and it depends on that. You can also change your social learning strategically. And then finally, yeah, this is a Rod Hawkins work. So we can also use others' behavior to guess who is most successful individual. So copying successful individual is one of the beneficial social learning strategies. But who is successful isn't really always obvious. But we can still guess this other success only from the social interaction, and we can infer this information through the outward behavior alone. So yeah, these are the third mind being very beneficial in the social learning. And also, yeah, yet another important context of social learning is actually teaching. So that's why I'm talking only about social learning strategy, but we can also so the teaching is the information giving side of strategy, and this is also very key in understanding cultural transmission dynamics in humans, and maybe also other non-human animals too. So it's quite rare in non-human animals, but some exceptional examples exist. For example, these ants, they are kind of tandem running ants doing some kind of advice giving type of behavior. And also, this is a well-known meerkat teaching behavior. This is a YouTube video. Yeah, this study done by Alex Thornton and colleague. So they are the meerkat are teaching how to handle poisonous scorpion to the offspring, right, by like very step-by-step pedagogical way. So this is quite impressive. So those kind of teaching behavior exist in non-human animals too, but still quite rare. Evidence is not really, it's very limited. And so, the right-hand side are human example, but they are very simpler kind of teaching. It's just that, yeah, so information giving type of behavior. So the top one is advice giving, and the second one is just kind of ratings or with review and ratings info in online market, right? So these are actively information sharing, which could be defined as a kind of teaching from the perspective of animal teaching context. But in this example, we don't really need to use metacognitive or social inference skill. This is just costly information giving. The human, what is unique in, especially unique in human teaching, is that we also use social inference skill in teaching. So these are examples showing like how communicative teaching is important in generating cumulative culture evolution, and also like bottom left showing this teaching in terms of like punishing or rewarding to the learner could be used as a kind of communicative tool in human teaching context. And also the third example shows this, the teaching metacognition is quite crucial to teach in an efficient way. So those examples shows that our third mind or cognitive mechanisms could be very crucial, not only in social learning, but also in teaching as well. Yeah, and yet another kind of key context related to social learning task, culture evolution. So culture evolution is, when we learn each other, when we learn from others, then information is transmitted among population, right? So then some informational transmission will generate some pattern in the population level. And so we can consider this culture evolution dynamics is also kind of a decision-making task as well. And then especially in cultural evolution context, the task itself, decision-making task itself could be also evolving over time. So like, if let's say, if this is a multi-unbounded task, but each arm could be seen as a different cultural trait, like different arrowheads or different agricultural technologies. And then if these are different, distinct behavior options, and they are also evolving over time. So in a sense, in culture evolution, the learning and decision-making task is evolving with learning agent. So that's an interesting aspect. Yeah, and also like, I think this is related to the concept of sociome, which Meg gave a talk this morning. So because we can modify the environment, our social structures and our culture is changing over time. And this would mean that this would feedback to the ecologically or evolutionary process. So, and then so we need to think about this niche construction dynamics. So that's a kind of interesting next step. Right, so yeah, so that's the kind of quick overview or quick walkthrough of the kind of potential relationship between very basic multi-unbounded task to more diverse different types of social learning related programs. So yeah, I'd like to go back to this later, but let me briefly then walk through and to show this what is multi-unbounded task is, and then I'd like to do some demo. Yeah, oh yeah, so these are kind of summary of the potential connections, and I'd like to come back to this point later. So multi-unbounded is again, this is the definition is very simple. The key feature is like reward is unknown until you actually choose the option behavior. So until you try, you don't know how rewardable it is. So you have to choose if you want to explore things. And then your goal is to maximize your overall payoff by sequentially playing, choosing among between multiple options. So so that's why therefore, and then the time is limited. So that which means you can't leave forever. So you have to finish it at some point, right? So therefore, you have to be you have to think about strategically how to balance between exploration and exploitation. So that's the key feature, and because exploration and exploitation trade-off is actually everywhere in animal behavioral programs, the multi-unbounded tasks could be widely used, commonly used in the literature. So yeah, let me just briefly explain the kind of this multi-unbounded game using this following the literature. So let's say you are a farmer, you are a newbie farmer, and then you are planning to plant either potato or maybe that's potato wheat, and you don't know which one is profitable this year because you're a newbie, you don't have any information, knowledge, but you have, you can have future multiple seasons, to plant, so you can explore it. And so the task is although you can observe some payoffs by choosing each option, and the payoffs might be kind of with some noise, but still you can see some difference between potato and wheat, right? But these are kind of what you can observe. And then this is what you cannot observe actually, but this task, individuals cannot really know the actual environmental payoff generative process, which is hidden. So the task is like to learn this through your own experience, or your own observation. So that's the kind of core issue, a program of the Mauritian bandit. And of course, you can scale it up to any number of options like 10-arm bandit or 30-arm bandit. But yeah, let's stick with 2-arm case, in a code notebook example. But yeah, 2-arm bandit is very boring when we run online game experiment here. So I just make it more fun game. To give you some basic intuitive sense of what this Mauritian bandit task is and how social learning could be beneficial in this type of game, I'd like to invite you to the demo game. So in this demo, the cover story is that in this game you'll be a kind of fisherman or fisher person. You move to a new fisher village and you have to survive through fishing, right? So your task is to catch as much fish as possible. So yeah, I feel a little bit guilty to say that because of this overfishing. But let's say this is an imaginary world where infinite number of fish exist underneath the sea. So you can catch many fish without any duty. Anyway, these grids represent different area of the ocean, and each area might have different amount of fish. You have to move around and catch a fish, and so these are each cell represent different arms of the mountain bandit. So first I'd like you to do this individual task to get some basic sense. So please go to the
live demonstrations is the main header, and then visual learning experiment is the link.
So please go to the tutorial 1, and then live demonstration, and then please click individual learning experiment, and then so these are just the individual tasks, so you can just free to start. Yeah, that'd be because yeah. Where is that?
So maybe at the end we can have some discussions. That sounds good.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we're done. So I think give kind of now see how it's important to balance exploration and exploitation, right? If you explore infinitely, you can just do this random performance. But if it's too early, it's also not the best idea. So you have to be like nicely balanced between these two. So that's the kind of basic individual task. And so secondly, I'd like to invite you to the social learning task, where how can I open up my slides back? Yeah. Fourth thing. Oh yeah.
So are we to work on the tasks now?
Yes, have to go to the keynote on the bottom. Oops. There we go.
Oh yeah, cool. So in this social learning task, then in this context, you be like cover stories like you're not alone in this ocean. So there are many other ships also catching fish. But as I said, in this ocean, in this imaginary world, actually infinite number of fish. So there's no competition between you, right? So you can just but you share the same environment with other ships. So which means social learning, where other ships fishing could be informative, right? So you can wisely use this social info to maximize your own reward. All right. So, is there any questions? Yeah. Other players are actually, yeah.
Yeah, so just below the previous link, there's the social learning experiment link.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Several different lobbies based on group size.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Maximum group size is 30 now. So, but no worries, you can just click the link and maybe there'll be two groups emerges.
Maybe it's not in groups, might get a little bit busy. I was trying to get back to
But yeah, maybe.
I know.
Oh my God, so many ships. Oh, I followed. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So it's already running on an iPhone on like a smartphone. It's small, so yeah.
I feel
Nice, well done, guys. So this was a social learning task, and I saw some result, and which was impressive. We can jump to the most reward very quickly. By the way, you can download your result actually by clicking the button. So if you like, you can do analysis of it. So that's the kind of social learning task without any competition, right? But as I said, this is a fishery context, and so in real world, fish amount is limited. So therefore, there might be like the amount of fish might be decreasing when many people converge in the same area. So the next one, actually final one, I'd like to invite this competitive social learning task. So in this case, the amount of fish available at the cell is actually basically fixed. So the reward is maybe divided by other ship in the same area, right? So that's different from others, different from the previous one. Yeah. So are you ready? Okay, cool. Then yeah, please click this compressive one.
Are you hiding it so you don't
Yeah.
feel information? People. I didn't see my payoff. I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, that's so many people here.
This is why we do
This- Yeah, but maybe the group.
Does it explain this? Yeah, I'm not. It's not
Yeah. Yeah, maybe group size is too large for this arena.
How many times have you played this? What's your secret? Yeah, you're right. I don't know what you think.
No, but then it'll be like popular and it won't work anymore.
Yeah.
It's not right.
Even split, yeah. Yeah, well done. I think the group size density is too high, and there's no way to escape actually. So, but yeah, but yeah, result, as you can see, result totally
Hello.
differently from
Hello.
line task, right? So here, no, we need to escape from the popular option. So no. By the way, so if you download the result, you can see the timing of each individual decision making. So as you can see, in this game, you can actually wait until others make a decision. So maybe these temporal dynamics might be also interesting, to look at. Because strategically wait, others maybe have also free riding. But yeah, I leave it to your.
Sorry, I have a question.
So there's a question on the Zoom. Let me turn on the volume a bit higher.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I want to ask if we have to work on the task now, and where can we find it again?
Oh, the task, the demo task, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, you can find the link in a tutorial code notebook. If you go
Okay.
to, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Right. So right. So yeah. So this so that was a very basic multi-unbounded task with and without social learning and without competition. But as I said, this is like one of the most basic, simplest type of decision-making tasks. But in the real world, this a bunch of other more complex tasks exist. Yeah. So, and we have like kind of 3 minutes left. So,
So we're hoping to have maybe a bit of a discussion. Like, so the idea here is that we thought of multi-events kind of a very central component where we can make very minor tweaks and kind of describe a whole galaxy of different types of social learning problems. Now, certainly a lot of tasks don't fit into this. And so maybe what we can have as a discussion now, we have Alex and Joel bringing around some mics, where we can try to discuss what types of problems can we describe with this framework, but what other types of problems maybe we can't, and what we would need to do to describe, create a setting where we can model and describe behavior in those other social and collective settings. So maybe we'd like to open the floor right now to if anyone has any kind of ideas for additional types of problems that we can also describe. Maybe where some of these tweaks to describe other types of tasks are maybe a bit unclear, or if they have any other types of social or decision-making problems that don't fit within this framework, and we can try to discuss how we would describe a way to model that behavior. So be shy. There's a question here. Yeah. Want to pass the mic around?
I wonder, is there a variation where values of the group change as the culture evolves, or as the progress goes on, they don't optimize the initial reward?
Yeah, that's certainly possible. So there's a common type of bandit problems called a restless bandit, where the values drift over time or change over time, right? I think I also saw a poster yesterday where they had a reversal where the values flipped, right? And so this is also a common framework in which to describe these types of problems.
You mean the value of the resource split, or the value of the I wonder whether it's possible to have the value of the agents with, as in the value of different things now.
Yeah, that's certainly possible, right? So we briefly showed Alex's experiments where each individual had a different payoff function. You can also have those individual payoff functions change over time, right? But there still offers opportunities for social learning so long as there's some relationship between our information, right? So maybe even though you might not like sushi, but Wataru likes sushi, you might still like other types of Japanese food, and his restaurant recommendations might still be valuable, right? With some grain of salt that's applied.
Could you also have situations where, depending on your individual success, for example, like the shape, like the size of your box, you have to like just use biases where,
Yeah.
like,
We kind of briefly showed that this Minecraft experiment I have, where people specifically are selective in who they imitate based on success, right? Robert Hawkins will be presenting later today. Also has this case where the rewards are not visible, but just based on behavior, these little arrows will start circling one area. You're gonna maybe infer that they're successful, and therefore use that information to selectively imitate them, right? So both overt and covert behaviors, right? Indicators of success based on behavior can be used to inform who to selectively copy, right, or to use social information from.
and then if you can apply that, would there also be an option, for example, in which the person can hide can choose to hide their success, and people can get punished for example, not sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
So there was even this kind of simulation from one of my past papers here, right? This little simulation here. This is a high dimensional fitness landscape, but we are only showing 2 dimensions here. And agents are either sharers or non-sharers. They kind of globally share the information. And here we're seeing a setting where this sharing information is actually beneficial to the agents, even though it's a competitive environment, because it acts as a recruitment call, right? And then it creates a more tightly knit group that searches more effectively as a group. So this is certainly something that's very easy to implement here. Question in the back. There's another microphone coming from there. Joe, press the button once. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe another question for that problem that is not suitable for content automated modeling. So like I was thinking about the shepherding situation where you have 2 collectives and like one collective shepherd form the landscape of the second collective.
Right. So are you talking about shepherding like just like sheep, for instance, moving them to one outcome? I mean, this is one of those situations where it's like the opposite of the competitive task you just did, right? So let's assume there's discrete locations you can bring people. Here in the fishing experiment with competitive rewards, everyone's trying to disperse as much as possible. But you can also define the opposite type of dynamic landscape where you get more benefits when everyone's together, right? For instance, like hosting a party or social events, right? People like being together. And so then that's one of those situations where you also have a dynamically changing fitness landscape in a bandit setting, but it's based on the goal of shepherding. So it's actually not, I think that should also be possible in this framework.
Yeah, but maybe that aspect that like a collective of like a group actually forms the landscape rather than, because here it's still like the landscape is given and a group is just exploring it. But I can imagine realistic situation when especially in a cultural evolution where I feel like there is not a given landscape where like culture can go. It's rather a landscape that's evolving through the
Right.
group.
So the social network is itself a landscape. That's certainly correct. But when you're developing cultural innovations, right, certain solutions correspond to better outcomes. And that also defines what we can describe as this high dimensional fitness landscape, right? So the space of all the possible tools you can invent or technologies you can invent is a landscape as well, but it's also interacting with the social network and the social interaction structure, which modifies that landscape or changes what's possible for you to explore, right? But I think in that sense, we can still think about it in terms of some sort of fitness landscape, at least abstractly, right? And that's still a helpful tool to model this. And it's still perhaps we can fit it into this framework still. Yeah, thank you so much. Any others? Yeah. So there's one here, one here.
It seems like it might be important to also represent your own skill in addition to other people's prestige skill when figuring out does that come back to me or because of the stop.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. Like let's imagine a case where maybe it's not like just fishing, but maybe like a deep sea diving, right? You had to dive for pearls, but maybe some locations that you're seeing other people dive at, you just don't have the ability to hold your breath and go down there without dying, right? So you certainly have to account for your own skill as well. So we can all encode this based on kind of some interaction between our own individual abilities and the fitness landscape, right? So then it's still some sort of fitness landscape, but it's individualized based on what we're capable of accomplishing. So I think we can still manage to squeeze that in. Yeah, there's one here, and then also one back there.
Yes, I've been wondering, so this kind of landscape works when you have like a clear performance measure or like fitness measure, right? Where it's like a single specific thing that you can quantify it. But there's a lot of situations where measure isn't that objectively given, and we like social construct measures of values. Like for example, you know, on the market, prices are determined by buying and selling, right? So social interactions, or maybe like social prestige is constructed by, you know, different estimations of people and how they like kind of collectively aggregate that. So I've been thinking maybe of like, could we find ways of having these social dynamics kind of assign values to maybe different squares, or in a more abstract ways, like how social interactions could construct these values that aren't really that much given in the environment.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So when we showed that animation of the dynamic fitness landscape, it was a combination of two factors. One's a sort of natural environment, some sort of static environment, and one based on the social components. Now, if you take away completely the A social environment and have it flat, then it's just the dynamics. That's just that case you're talking about, right? But if you also have some natural structure to the environment, where certain, like no matter what the market's dynamics are, like some things are still better than others, right? You can then build in that and have this interaction. And you were saying like many real world cases, we don't have the true structure of the environment, but often when we're programming experiments, we have to make some assumptions, either to kind of create some sort of generative process, right? So what's nice about these bandit problems, we can define this generative process. We define the reward distributions based on something like a Gaussian distribution, or based on Bernoulli distribution, or based on any types of kind of features we want to model in the experiment, and then we test this. If even better though, sometimes we can get real world data that kind of fits into to define these payoff distributions, rather than just assuming some sort of mathematically nice format. And a combination of both is helpful to understand behavior, both in kind of well-defined artificial contexts, but then also in these real world settings as well. I think we have time for some more discussion. So if there's a question back there.
Yeah, so it seems really hard to kind of represent like 16 distributions. So how are people like kind of evaluating the payoff each square? Like, do they just remember it like the 3 minutes of payoffs, or like what strategy?
That's a good point. So maybe this question for you, Atari, because you modeled it.
Yeah. So like I said, so in that case, in this task you played, there's no spatial structure at all. So there's no spatial correlations. So in that case, you have to actually, it's really hard to keep track, you know, which cell is better than others. That's right. But usually in the real world, you can use other information like those spatial correlations, or and then those can guide you, you know, could help you like keep like.
But is it like people have, they like remember, they have some approximation for like the mean in each square, or they remember the highest payoff squares?
In the generalized. Yeah, so in the spatially correlated bandit setting where people generalize, the kind of the rational model assumes you remember all your past experiences and then use that to generalize. Of course, that's not feasible when you have limited memory. So some work in my lab is currently looking at a forgetful model generalization, where we kind of weight features for priority from memory based on whether or not they're surprising, and based on recency as well. So these are two of the features that seem to matter, and how people prioritize what memories they store and what they forget. And then based on what they remember, then they can use this generalization procedure, right? Sometimes it's not always possible to differentiate like a fully rational model that remembers everything and uses all information from some that only have a restricted case. So you have to carefully design experiments that let you do this. And we'll touch on this a bit more when we talk about things like model recovery and model simulations, or how you can, before you run the experiment, oh, I screwed up, I can't actually capture this, that you can actually test for these things.
Also, she's
Very good
Lena,
question.
she's our new intern.
Oh, okay.
He's
Um,
David, he's also an
Any
intern.
more questions?
So they told you to implement the paper, right? Yeah, yeah. Or
Yes, they give
They
me
told you.
some,
Yeah.
some software I can work with.
Okay.
Figure out how it works for me.
You comfortable here?
Yes. Anyway.
Okay, so just if you need like a fixed place where you
If there
want
is
to stay,
no
let me.
clear guidance given in the instruction,
Yeah.
then I guess there could be a very different interpretation of the task as we just discussed, right? The and this trade-off, if there is like optimal like square in the environment which gives you a huge reward, then maybe it makes sense to explore as long as possible. But it's really like given the mental model of the task, there could be very different strategies.
Right. That's actually a very good point. So for people working with humans, I guess we're lucky to have the ability to communicate through instructions and to try to eliminate as much individual variability in how they interpreted the goal as much as possible, right? So we have everyone being as similar as possible. For animals, that's clearly less easy to do, right? For animal researchers. So I think this is also maybe one fundamental difference between kind of target species and how much individual variability we can reduce through instructions. But typically with human experiments, you try to make them as aligned as possible to the models that we're describing, right? So this is a typical kind of rule of thumb for modeling, is that you want your models to have the same goals and the same assumptions as the species or the decision makers that you're modeling, right? We can reduce this as much as possible through instructions, through pedagogy. Often experiments are really benefited by having some interactive tutorials or some sort of practice rounds to familiarize themselves. I think for animal researchers, this is certainly much more tricky, but a lot of pre-training is often necessary in order to get to meet some sort of a performance criterion before then the actual experimental data starts. So these are some methods that are used.
Yeah, but I'd say like, because this is why we need computational modeling. We can capture some type of individual differences through model, like fitting activities, for example. So we can actually identify individual differences through the perspective of this model, parametric difference, or maybe different models preferred by others. So we can actually study these differences through computational modeling in some sense. But as Charlie said, if it's totally massively different, then maybe it's also challenging. But I think one of the beauty of using modeling is actually we can capture these differences in a concrete way.
Yeah. Great. Maybe time for 2 more questions.
Yeah, so kind of a follow-up from that, but a little bit off of the instruction part, but individual differences in, for example, the human experience. If you face early adversity, if you're talking about developmental perspectives, maybe from there you can start exploiting more and exploring less, just because you know the environment that you're in isn't stable, isn't stable, and isn't safe. I can also see kind of the difference between kids versus adults in sports is another thing that would be also interesting to look at. That just goes along like the instructions and
yeah. But so these are very good points. So ideally, what we want in our models are parameters that are interpretable, based and capture kind of reliable kind of fingerprints of people's kind of cognitive processes as they're making these decisions. And I think the other really important point you made is that when we do an experiment, we only get a snapshot, and people's expectations that they bring to bear about the stability of the world, the kind of the richness or scarcity of resources, right, based on their early development, makes very important contributions to the type of behaviors that deploy, right? So I think this means that we have to be really careful in what we think is rational, because it's rational for our model, which assumes the same environment that you're testing on, is not going to be what's rational for humans who have gone through our whole lives, right, interacting with a huge diverse range of settings, and then boom, they're doing this silly little computer game, and maybe what's rational there is not what's rational based on their life history, right? So this is actually very important.
Yeah, and then having like an environment that has different environmental cues, different parameters, and how you can tune that based off of individual experience.
Yeah, very nice. There's a question here.
regarding this exploration exploitation trade-off. I think in biology, like bad hedging, like people talk about bad hedging, it's really important, if I remember correctly, like the cost function or reward, whether it's convex or concave. Does this change, like how much does it change on these?
Yeah, so that's actually very important, right? So often these types of problems are based on maximizing some reward, but it's assuming like every bit of reward is one bit of extra enjoyment, right? But in the real world, for instance, if you don't catch any food on one season, right, you might starve. And so that is like an extreme loss, right? So often though, we make the simplification that is just based on maximizing reward, assuming it's this kind of a monotonic function, right, of utility, but certainly that's not always the case, right? And with risk, I think I saw a bunch of posters showing situations of loss, right, where you don't only get rewards, you also get losses. This also creates asymmetric learning behaviors where maybe people learn differently for positive outcomes than they do for negative outcomes, right? And certainly these situations of like that hedging, like you mentioned, right? We have to really avoid the zero outcome, right? Because if you ever get zero food in one season and we die, that's infinitely worse than any other situation. So we have to really be careful to avoid that, right? So, but these are all methods that you can also build into your models and build it into this kind of basic framework where we merely tell you some sort of numerical representation of outcome, and we try to learn what the distribution is, and then we try to select actions based on our beliefs about that.